Welcome to the Motoring Podcast, your weekly discussion of motoring news. This is episode 616 on Tuesday, the 28th of January, 2025. Hello, I'm Alan.
Hello, I'm Andrew. And this week we'll be screaming at the industry to stop being so bad at software. In new car news, we investigate if bigger is better. And in points of interest, we go back to the 90s. But first, we have some follow-up. There are 4 news items of follow-up this week, I'm afraid, everyone, so strap in. I am going to start with the first one, which is we are linking to an article from AM Online, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer is intervening in the car loan mis-selling case to shield lenders.
That's not the way it's meant to be, is it?
What, the government looking after companies rather than its citizens?
Yes, that.
Yeah.
I've just left the US, so I might be confusing, and I think that's how it is there, but it's not how it's meant to be here, is it?
It's not how it should be, because this is, if you haven't followed along with us on this one, and there will be another article from The Conversation that's linked that brings you up to speed on summarising how we've got to this position where the mis-selling cases are in the Court of Appeals now, and why the Chancellor stepped in, because they don't want another PPI scandal type. What it's being called as is a windfall or bonanza for the people who've been ripped off by the companies who have broken common law. This is not that it's a bit of a dodgy decision. They've broken common law. And now the government's saying, oh, don't make the compensation much, though. Please. This was mentioned on LinkedIn. I responded to it because in case it's not coming through, I'm not a fan of what is happening here. I don't believe it's fair because the problem is that the rules that everyone was working to did not comply with common law. That's a failing on the part of industry and the commission that oversaw to make sure that the finance stuff was fair. That's their fault for getting that wrong. They should, at a basic level, whatever rules they put in place should be legal. Again, unless I'm being naive and stupid here.
Well, that would seem reasonable.
Why should the consumers who were affected by this, who were ripped off by this, who paid more than they should have paid, not be compensated? Again, that does not feel fair. Something
that bugs me about this is that, and sorry, we're going to get political for a moment or two here, is that there's a lot of talk about growth from the government. And to me, in my tiny little mind, now I am no economist, so please get in touch, tell me I'm wrong, tell me why I'm wrong, that it always seems to me that if you're looking for growth, then what you actually want is people to go out and spend money. So the more you can get money to move around a bit, people get this thing that they weren't expecting. Oh, this is wonderful. Look at this surprise. It's tax season in the USA. And this is what happens is you withhold so much tax and you pay the government, and essentially they then give you back your tax refund. And people see this as already spent money. They've got this new money and they go out and they buy stuff with it that they wouldn't necessarily have bought. But in this case, it would be that sort of situation. People would get £500, £600, whatever, and they would probably go out and spend it on something nice.
Yeah.
And they would go out and it would be a nice thing, and they would spend money and move money around in the same way as the US tax thing. It seems strange to me that you don't want people getting these windfalls. I'm doing air quotes because that's what it has in the article here. You get these windfalls, which they will then spend on something nice, invigorate the economy, make growth, all these kind of things. But what do I know, really?
No, I think you're perfectly right there. And the other thing for me is that it just gives the impression that a company or an industry can be wrong, have bad practices, break the law, and not actually get properly punished for it. They've had years of profits based off these illegal work practices, and yet the government then goes, oh no, we must protect them. We're worried about the industry. Well, if you didn't spill everything to shareholders, then you would have that money and you could repay it, or you should actually have insurance to cover for being stupid and doing something wrong. But that's a different matter. There are links in show notes. Do have a read. Feel free to get as angry as I feel about it in your own time.
This is the muted, dulled down version, folks. Okay?
I didn't want to have to edit too much of myself.
Yeah.
continuing with the court theme, though, Alan, why don't you take us to Europe?
The Chinese EV importers. We've been talking lots about the EU tariffs recently.
Chinese-made EV.
Sorry, Chinese-made EV importing companies who may or may not be seen as being manufacturers based in other countries, but still build them there. So that can include basically any Chinese name that you think of, plus, of course, BMW, plus the Volvos, Polestars, all of these kind of things. And also joining in, just because they don't want to be left out, Tesla as well. All of these companies are banding together, taking legal action against the EU over the tariffs that were recently announced. Those range from 7 to 36%. I mean, Tesla, who just joined in, are at 7.8%. They're one of the very lowest of the lot because it's seen that the Chinese government hasn't contributed to the development or very much at all. They've all decided that they're going to take up legal proceedings against the EU. Now, this will be through the EU General Court, and these proceedings are typically take about 18 months, and then after that, they can be appealed once again. What I understand from that is this is not going to be an overnight decision, and it is not going to be a quick solution to anything. People are going to have to lump it, certainly, for a little while.
Yep. I am going to
get angry.
Well, I'm going to get, incredibly angry at this one. We reported quite a while ago that the NHTSA was looking into a couple of accidents involving Ford's BLUECRUISE driver assistance system, which is the hands-off, eyes-on system that allows drivers to relinquish certain amounts of control to the vehicle. And the two vehicles are involved in fatal accidents. And in this investigation, the NHTSA has found the staggering fact that at 62 mile an hour and over, to prevent phantom braking, the car will take no action if it detects stationary objects in its path. Now, I'll say that again, because I don't expect you're going to believe what I've just said, because I hardly do. But at over 62 miles an hour, the vehicle takes no action if it spots stationary objects ahead of it.
If you're doing 65 miles an hour and you come across a vehicle stopped in your lane, or you come across a vehicle stopped everywhere, then it's just going to plow into the back of it, is essentially how I understand that.
I'm almost speechless with anger at whoever decided, and that a company thought that this was acceptable to go onto the public roads.
Well, the thing is that according to this article on Auto Evolution, as always, linked in the show notes, there is a paragraph towards the end that says there's a bigger problem than Ford because most car makers have programmed their driver assistance systems this way. Basically, all radar-based systems have this limitation, something that's disclosed in the operating manuals of many vehicles. Even the Ford Mustang Mach-E has a warning in its manual that the system might not detect stationary or slow-moving vehicles.
Why have you released it then?
Yeah.
Why have you released it onto the public roads? When you are advertising is saying that this will drive you, because we've got the example of another company where a senior member of that staff has done this for the last decade, and we've had fatalities. So you've got the evidence, and yet you've decided to follow that. Once again, the car industry learns the wrong lessons. Link in the show notes. Once again, feel free to get as angry as I do in your own time.
And feel free to tell him you're as angry as he is, just so he knows he's not alone.
There are times when you see things like that, you just think, I'm the one who's gone mad because so many clearly think this is acceptable.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not acceptable. You've just got to be so careful about this stuff, really.
Stop putting ADAS on public roads because none of it is fit for public road use. It is fit to pass the test that it is given.
Anyway, speaking of public roads.
And some good news.
He's not angry about this one, everyone. Good news. Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, has put forward back in December 2023 an £86 million proposal once they had dropped plans to charge for a clean air zone after public backlash. The government has now ruled that the plan will see air pollution cut to within legal limits by 2026. And as a result, Greater Manchester is going to have a clean air zone, but it's also not going to charge you for entering the clean air zone. It's not going to charge normals. Normal drivers doing it. It's not going to charge trucks, buses, or taxis.
No, the previous plan was going to charge commercial vehicles and taxis, not private individuals. But Andy Burnham paused that when citing that the cost of living crisis had meant that would be unfair to bring that in. Therefore, they came up with this second plan.
Where does the £86 million go, I hear you cry? Well, £51 million is going to be for clean air compliant emissions buses to run the B network, which is Greater Manchester's public transport system. And you were saying that the other week you saw one and it desperately needed this.
Yeah, because the B network is recently been taken over by Greater Manchester Metropolitan, so the council is running it themselves.
Instead of First or Stagecoach or Arriva or any of these bunches of crooks.
But this is being run by the local authority, not the, what do you call them? It's larger than a local authority, but it's for the region. But it's being run by the public sector.
5 more millions earmarked for traffic management measures to improve flow on roads in Manchester and Salford, including Regent Road and Key Street. £8 million has been pledged to help Hackney carriage drivers and taxis move to cleaner vehicles.
Good.
I'm not sure how I feel about that one. It is good, yes. That all sounds like pretty good news, really.
And amazing how Manchester can make this work, but everyone else wants to charge.
Yeah.
So what will be fascinating, actually, is if they do hit the targets they have to hit by the end of next year. And if they do so, where the citizens in other cities that are being charged turn around and go, excuse me.
I'm thinking Bristol and Glasgow and Oxford and others.
Yeah, absolutely. But I hope it works. This is the way to do it: is you fix public transport as quickly as possible. You fix buses, taxis as quickly as possible, and hopefully you don't have to then move on to private motor vehicles. As through the natural progression, newer vehicles are then purchased by people or vehicles with improved standards of emissions. So therefore that naturally comes down.
Manchester has a pretty decent public transport system. If they can make it a bit better, it's almost a no-brainer to not want to drive into Manchester. Yeah. It's like in Boston recently when they fixed the T. Mm-hmm. And most of the time I was in Boston, and you just getting the red line was a form of hell. Even at the weekends, you were better off driving into the city and parking. All of a sudden, they fixed the public transport. The general manager in charge of MBTA managed to get rid of all of the slow zones over about 8 months. It was a lot of work, but all of a sudden, it stops making sense to drive. It makes more sense to get the T, financially and time-wise as well.
Yeah.
Crazy. It was amazing when it started moving faster than walking pace. And if Manchester can do a little bit of that, invest in some of that, then hopefully the number of cars goes down and all is good.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I think that's new news now. Finally, we've got through that. And the first item is from an Auto Retail Agenda article that talks about how the Volkswagen Group has decided for their electric vehicles they will no longer use the agency model to sell them. They're going back to using the dealerships. The internal combustion engine vehicles were still being sold via dealers anyway. This is just basically giving everything back to the dealers, including the liability for vehicles not being sold.
It also probably means that there's more incentive on local salesmen to sell EVs as well, whereas previously there probably wasn't. I mean, obviously, Volkswagen, we covered this kind of stuff quite regularly. Stellantis, Ford, JLR are three of the groups who have dropped back from implementing a full agency model. In the same kind of sector, Lotus and Polestar too, but that made slightly less sense to have full dealers for them.
Yep. Wonder whether it'll make that much difference in 2025, though.
You never know. As I say, with the salesman maybe being moved on to traditional incentives, then that might well drive the difference.
I just think it's going to be a real tough year. Doesn't matter who's trying to sell them.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a pretty general.
Yeah.
General statement, anyway. Next up, something slightly different, actually. And we did have a bit of a debate as to whether this should be a lunchtime read or not. But it's an interesting article by a chap called Sam Curry, and it talks about car hacking, finding a vulnerability, exploiting that vulnerability, testing that vulnerability, and then telling the manufacturer about that vulnerability and the manufacturer fixing it as well. And it was fixed within 24 hours. But it's all about the Subaru Starlink system,
which is their connected services.
It's their connected services come nav infotainment system. They've been using it for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But Sam and a chap called Shubham Shah had discovered a security vulnerability, which meant that you could get unrestricted targeted access to all vehicles and customer accounts in the US, Canada, and Japan. As I say, this has since been patched. He bought his mum a car. He bought his mum a Subaru so they could pocket it. That was the understanding. Mum, I will buy you this, but I have to be able to borrow it and try to hack it. And it took about a year in total, I think, including some time, obviously not non-stop, because I think his mum probably wanted to drive the car.
So selfish.
So selfish, but a good bit of poking between the Starlink admin panels and all sorts of stuff. Well worth a read. I don't want to talk too much about it just now. It's interesting to give a little bit of a look behind, I think, what's going to be covered in the next couple of stories, talking about security vulnerabilities in vehicles and finding them and fixing them and all that kind of stuff. Do have a good read of this. Really well worth following the link.
And the other point with the Subaru one is that you could actually remotely control the certain aspects of the vehicle. You could stop and start it. You could unlock it, and you could get the current location of the vehicle. There's in very early in the article that's linked in the show notes, there is an explanation of what could be got to.
It tells you that in the introduction.
Really seriously not good.
Yeah.
And come on, car industry, just do better, for crying out loud. That should not have been able to be done.
Mm-hmm.
You can't charge us thousands of pounds, dollars, whatever, yen. Say trust us, and then do things like this.
Yeah. And the thing is, in the US and Canada, certainly, the whole security through obscurity which you would get by driving a Subaru in the UK and in Europe, it just doesn't exist. They are absolutely everywhere. So, anyway, that was a quick intro. Do you want to take the next one, Andrew? Because it's the kind of thing that makes you really happy.
Yes, continuing the theme of my cheerfulness tonight. We're going to move on to WAYMO and how...
I think we've got a title for the show, by the way. I propose My Cheerfulness Tonight. I don't normally get a say in these things, so I'm just making it public.
Okay, I might cut it so no one knows. But in the latest article of cars that have been hacked, it's WAYMO. On the one hand, fortunately, all that was done was the top pod on the roof of the WAYMO vehicle. You can change text and display text on it to maybe alert passers-by that it's giving way to you, or, and here's the real reason, you can put adverts on it. But a security researcher called Jane Manchin Wong has just been playing about with the app on her phone and managed to get in and was able to change the displays and put different things on it. She put this on Twitter, and since then, WAYMO have patched that so normal users can't access this hidden feature in the app. But I'm sorry, don't ask me to trust your driverless vehicle if you can't even keep that secure. If you can't keep the bit that's showing a bit of display, because if you can't do something that isn't safety critical like that, how am I supposed to believe you've looked after the rest of the vehicle?
It's not really going to be a massive risk with you, is it? Because you're not going to be going within 20 feet anyway.
No, I'm not going to America, fortunately. But the problem is, what happens to people who choose not to go in those vehicles and something goes wrong. I go back to what I finished off the last one with is, don't ask us to trust you until you start doing better. and you're not doing better.
Speaking of which, I can never pronounce this, the Pwn to Own Automotive 2025. I don't know how you describe it. It's a hacking contest. I was going to call it a festival as a bit of a joke, but it's not. It's a hacking contest.
It's deliberately set up. Yeah.
It is deliberately set up, yes. So it is a conference. It is set up. There are vehicle-adjacent devices. Some cases, I mean, Tesla took along basically a series of boxes, which was a Model 3/Y benchtop unit, and people try to hack them and break them. This year's was in Tokyo, as a result of which security researchers managed to exploit 49 zero-day exploits.
0 day means that these are vulnerabilities that no one's discovered before.
Yeah.
On top of the 49, there were others that were known from last year that had not been patched.
Yeah. The thing is, it's a conference, but there's prize money for actually going and making these exploits. In total, it was $886,250 paid out across all of the various groups who did it. And some gained over $200,000 of that. So a lot of work done to try to keep a lot of people, a lot of us safe from errors, mistakes, and oversights. Really, I mean, lots of issues with wall connectors and chargers. By the way,
yep.
Just to be aware, wall connectors and chargers were a major part of that.
In-vehicle infotainment systems were another thing, and as our friend of the show, Ken Tyndall, will say, it's always the infotainment system.
I mean, that's just what we've just been talking about with Subaru.
Mm. Yeah, it's
basically the infotainment system, and it's
yes,
good news. I think it's at least a good news story.
Well, yes, we will title the company correctly, unlike the BBC News article that's linked in the show notes. JLR are investing $80 million in their Castle Bromwich and their Nitra, Slovakia plants to enable them to offer a more extensive personalization service, particularly with the paint options that they are able to give for the Range Rover models at the moment, but obviously then this will expand as Jaguar comes online and more newer models as they aim for the luxury market. This is a good thing because they're investing money and will be employing people and have found a need from their customers, which they are making enough money to be able to deal with this.
One of the things, of course, and one of the reasons this is important, is it does show a certain amount of understanding of the whole segment that they're aiming at, that they talk about aiming at, the Bentley, the Rolls-Royce type segment, that the new Jaguar model, whatever it looks like, is going to be going after. And one of the things there is the ability to have it the way you want it, and to have your choice of colours, and to have all of these kind of things, so that you can have it exactly the shade of green you want. And that is very, very difficult.
If you're the company, that's the way you make really serious money. I mean, we've seen with Bentley.
We talked about that the other week.
Yeah. How many times when you talk about Bentley's astonishing financial results, in virtually the same sentence they say, because of our personalization service.
Yeah, it was Rolls-Royce the other week.
Yeah,
but yes, exactly that, expanding the choice. And this is Jaguar doing exactly the same thing. Notice it's in two plants at Castle Brom, so for Jaguar, and also in Slovakia right at the minute. That means the Defender, for example, and possibly other Range Rover models in the future.
Yep.
I can totally see why this is something worth investing in. And I think it's good news because it shows an understanding of the market they're going after.
Yep.
And it means, of course, there's a chance that you can get all the good colours.
Yes. Or actual colours.
Yes, actual colours. Oh, yeah.
Well, do you want to stick with JLR and them spending more money?
They are actually spending more money. They're spending what two car companies really is. It's a bit of a pittance, but it's quite an interesting idea, and I think it's pretty smart. They are providing, they being JLR, is providing $2 million to a Canadian startup called Cyclic Materials. It's doing it as part of the InMotion Ventures investment arm of JLR, believe it or not, that exists. And it's part of and it's just part of an investment. BMW I Ventures, BMW's investment arm, is also an investor in Cyclic. And what Cyclic is doing, it is taking magnets, so from inside starter motors, alternators, and electric motors, all of these things, and they're going to use the magnets from inside those, and they're going to extract the sort of various rare earth metals from those end-of-life products, and they're going to bring them back in so that new magnets and new things can be created from those same metals and extracted stuff. This is good because obviously they're called rare earth metals because they're rare.
Yes.
And we want to do that. And again, it's really advanced recycling.
Yes.
Stuff. One trouble they have is that they don't quite have a 100% working, and not so much working,
commercial
setup yet. Once they do, they expect to be able to take material from all sorts of sources and process it this way. But they're scaling up at the minute to a commercial level. It's $2 million to a car company. That's really not a lot of money.
No, not.
But it's a good thing to be investing in.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I think we finally have made it to the end of the first part. I haven't completely exploded in anger, so that's good.
Yeah, we've done all right. We've kept you simmering as opposed to actually reaching a boil. But right at the minute, it's Guilt Minute, the quick break in the show where we ask for a tad of financial support to keep the lights on and the hosting running. If you feel the Motoring Podcast is worth a small consideration every month, then you can become a patron. The different levels of patron include different levels of commitment from us to you, including being able to watch the show recorded live. We also have a small range of merchandise in our spring store, from stickers to mugs and t-shirts. If you don't have any spare cash, and we do completely understand, then you can help us by following for free from our podcast player to receive every show as they're released, and by liking and rating the show in whatever way your podcast supplier lets you. If you've done all that, some of you do, so thank you so very much. Then the last thing you can do is to recommend us to your friends or colleagues.
Thank you, everyone that does. It's very much appreciated.
As always, yeah. Andrew, your new car.
Yes, new car news, and we're going to start with the Dacia Bigster. This is coming in, starting from £25,000, but is going straight into challenge the likes of the Kia Sportage and the Volkswagen Tiguan in the C SUV segment, family SUVs. And one, I think it looks cracking. It's a chunky SUV. Yes, it's an SUV, but that is the market.
Only one version comes with all-wheel drive.
Mm-hmm. There's going to be a variety of powertrains, so there will be hybrid, but there are petrol versions as well. It looks like in the pictures, it looks like there's tons of space. The boot looks quite large, actually, and it follows again just from the information we've seen up to now, and there will be a link to a Motoring Research article in the show notes. But they are just supplying the tech that you need. That is a big cornerstone of Dacia's philosophy. They don't believe in giving absolutely everything because that puts the prices up. I mean, from a price point of view, this seems like virtually a
car for the money
brainer. I was blown away trying the Jogger a couple of years ago. Bearing in mind the price point, which was at just under £20,000 or £20,000, 7-seat car, or could be a 7-seat car, but it didn't feel lacking, if you know what I mean. It didn't feel that, all I'm doing is sitting on dreadful, horrible pleather and everything is hard plastic and there's nothing nice in this vehicle. It didn't feel like that at all.
That's going to be the theme of new car news this week, I think. But no, even the basic levels of this gets you keyless entry, you get parking sensors, you get a 10.1-inch central touchscreen with wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, get, admittedly, speed assisting, but never mind, cruise control. You get all of these things in there, so you're not exactly suffering.
Well, that's because of general safety rules too.
A certain amount of it is, but the big screen and stuff isn't necessarily. But it's still a decent level of spec.
What I am impressed with, because we've seen this with other brands that have started out at, we're all about affordability, and then they drift upwards in terms of price and perhaps
Are you thinking Skoda as well?
Yeah. They are still sticking with their core philosophy of being as affordable as possible for what they're offering.
Yeah.
And I think that, I would love to spend some time with one of these just to see what the fit and finish and the materials are like, because I think they're possibly some of the hardest working designers and engineers and material sources are the ones who can make this not feel like it is the cheap option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Just out of interest, I would have the basic level TC 130 with four-wheel drive in the very nice cedar green. And that actually would suit me down to the ground, I think, if I was in the market for a car. But that just seems it's got all the spec you need, none of the stuff you don't. Yeah. Really, really like it. And I think it looks good too.
Yeah, I do like Dacia's brand look at the moment.
And it seems to scale really nicely from everything from the spring right the way up.
Yeah.
The GWM Aura 03, formerly known as the Funky Cat, there is a whole load of spec changes going on here. But the important bit is it gains a new entry level for which they will charge you £7,000 less than the previous entry level. We know what the GWM Aura 03 looks like. It's the one that looks overly cutesy.
Well, it's a little bit.
It's anime
Porsche
style.
Cayenne Mark
Porsche
1
Cayenne meets new Beetle meets Nissan Micra. I think is a pity. It's kind of what it's like. It's got great big doe eyes that look pleadingly at you. So there's some new spec in here. The big news is the new Pure variant, which replaces the Pure Plus. They obviously thought a lot. It took a lot of time to think up these names, by the way. But it is £7,000 cheaper. That means it costs £24,995. Yet same 48 kilowatt hour battery as before. It gives you a 192 mile range, and you get most of the same kit. You still get your CarPlay, your Android Auto, your 360-degree camera, and Andrew's favourite, a facial recognition system.
But that price brings it in line with a lot of the new coming, more affordable EVs. I'm thinking of the
BYDs and stuff that we talked about last
the
time.
Grandi Pandis out soon, which is around that price. The Insta, from Hyundai.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a needed move.
Yes.
Particularly for a brand that isn't as well known as others.
No, exactly. One of the big changes is you get cloth seats instead of pleather. You don't get rear seat armrest, which, may well cause some wars in the back seat. It certainly did when I was growing up. And also you lose the memory auto folding side mirrors. I mean, I'm sure you still get side mirrors, but I think you lose the memory and the auto folding. There's another, above the Pure is a Pro. It's $6,000 cheaper than the Pro Plus that it replaces. You get the theme here. Bigger battery, 261 miles of range for £28,995. Again, a lot of range for the money. You also get more kit. But what you don't get is a panoramic roof, and you don't get massaging and ventilated front seats. If you do want all of that stuff, then there's a new GT line at the top, which is more aggressive styling, which wouldn't be very hard. A launch control system and a heat pump. And it's priced from just under £33,000.
Have you looked at the picture of the GT in the Autocar article? If you just flick across one, is it just me or do the wheels look massively underwheeled?
No, a little.
Yeah, unfortunately,
they do a wee bit. It's kind of cute. I like the little red bits.
I don't mind the red bits at all. That gives it a little bit of something.
It looks keen, which I think is a great start. I've just made fun of the GT, and I actually think it looks kind of fun. I do.
I'm not against the look of it. I'm not against the look of the GT.
You see, previously the others, the Pro, I was like, it's all right, whatever. Bland. It's a bit much. But this, I want to try it. Actually, you know what the rear three-quarters reminds me of from that picture? It reminds me of the original Toyota Auris, which I'm sure is not what they want me to think of.
Drink, everyone. Alan mentioned Toyota.
I'd like to try. I'd like to try it, but I don't know if it'd be any good. But I do like to try it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move on to points of interest and our lunchtime read. Oh, dear. We've included it, even though it does talk about Phony Stark and his recent actions and activities.
Just quickly, worth a heads up. If you're going to discuss this article with me on social media, do be aware that I have blocked Elon Musk's name.
Yes.
Okay? In the interests of my sanity, I still know exactly what's happening and going on because you can't avoid it. But just to lessen the flood, if you are going to discuss this, just don't put either part of his name into the message or into the post to me, please.
But what this talks about is, obviously, it mentions things that have happened in the last week or so. But what they talk about is there is the potential, because of the backlash from consumers, as well as Tesla's performance prior to January, which we had the first time that they were not growing in sales.
Yes.
Which is a bit of a shock. But this is a US-based article. So what you have to realize, because we don't have it quite as bad here, though if you mention electric cars, someone will just say Tesla. It's a bit like Hoover and vacuum.
Mm.
But in America, it is even more so, to the point where all the car companies are signing up or are selling adapters for their charging cables to be able to use the Tesla charging network, because the US system is absolute pants. And I think
there
I'm
isn't
being
a
polite.
system. It's the only system.
Yeah.
It's the only sort of pan-American system for it. They've opened it up. Tesla themselves are making the adapter plugs and then selling them or making them available via the other manufacturers, because Tesla has the best charging network.
Yes.
And it does. Tesla. Yeah. In North America, there is no comparison. It is after... And this is what bugs me about what's happening at the minute, is that it's taking away from the fact that Tesla was so vital. I've said this before on here, and you're just going to have to listen to me saying it again, I'm afraid, is that Tesla is so vital in the introduction of the electric car that it meant that people could see EVs beyond milk floats and local delivery vehicles and slow vehicles and tiny little commuter cars, which is what had been sold before.
Well, what the legacy industry, that was their mentality, meant that's what they offered.
And Tesla moved on from that. The second thing they did, and a lot of this was before Musk was really before he claimed the positions he claimed, was that they invested in the charger network. And the charger network was the magic that meant the cars could go distances where nothing else could.
Yep.
And that's so important. And building that network has been no small feat. It's almost completely ignored. It's not big. It's not sexy. It's not angular and bulletproof and all these other things. It's not going to take you to Mars. It's the least sexy thing that Tesla has done. It's also now the most successful thing that Tesla has done.
Yeah. And to underline that, the fear that is becoming more vocal, because I am seeing more and more people saying how Tesla could collapse. And you see headlines of investor says sell your Tesla shares, et cetera, because of what's happening. There's so many people going, with the bumper sticker, I bought this before, and all that sort of stuff that we all know about.
Yeah, well, you obviously weren't paying very much attention.
Well,
Sorry.
Yes. I think there's a new merch range to come from the Motoring Podcast with we did tell you about, and then we've got quite a few things we can fill the gaps with.
We told you so, yeah.
But the real fear is if it does go under and it is not bought up by somebody, because here's the thing. Does Tesla get to a point where a large legacy company takes it over, or does it just completely collapse? If it completely collapses, it's got a very, very big risk of nuking the US's EV future.
It's more likely to completely collapse. And I'll tell you why. Because the stock price has been so pumped that nobody else is going to be able to raise the money to be able to buy it unless the pitch is very, very low. And I think that it's going to have to go to that unless everything just sinks right down. But I don't know. The other thing is it is important to the US legacy automakers as well, and European and everyone else, because they sell a lot of cars.
Yeah.
They're not a baby. They're not a clever little startup. They are a serious car maker.
Well, yeah.
Well, no, they sell a lot of cars.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's what I'm saying.
Yes. Serious in terms of that.
Serious in terms of volume.
Yes.
How's about that?
Yeah.
And traditionally serious in terms of engineering, but less so, maybe. And so they're needed for these carbon credits.
Yeah.
Everybody else buys the carbon credits off them for a long, long, long time. That was their major source of income. That was actually the only way they made a profit. When they made a profit was through selling the carbon credits, not through selling the cars. With the price slashing, with all this other stuff, it wouldn't surprise me. And it'll go quickly, and then people will sweep up what's left. And anyone who's divvying it up will divvy out the charging, the factories, the IP as well. Still be worth lots of money, but I don't know how to the right buyer with the right brand, it won't be tarnished in the same way.
Yep.
Sorry, that was very ranty for a lunchtime read.
No, but do read this because it has really major implications. And that's the reason we put it in, not because it's talking about Phony Stark and the dreadful things he's doing or saying, but it is the implications of that.
Just realised we've completely forgotten to say it's from Inside EVs and it's by Kevin Williams.
Yeah.
As well, who writes, well, it's Inside EVs, but Kevin writes a lot about EVs from all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Next one, mine. Great list of the week this week. Absolutely brilliant list of the week this week.
Thank you, Haggerty.
Yes, thank you. It's on Haggerty. It's by Giles Chapman. That gives you an idea of the kind of research and stuff that's gone into it. And it's called Shoot from the Hip, 11 of the coolest shooting brakes. Now, you can argue amongst yourselves, I don't care if they are actually shooting brakes or whether they're estate cars. They are cars with a boxy back which can hold more luggage than a version without.
They all look cool as well, so it doesn't matter. So just ignore the shooting brake thing. Don't worry about that. They're all cool looking.
Try to restrain yourself, Internet. Andrew, do you have a favourite?
I have several favourites, but I have...
So do I.
I have chosen the Alfa Romeo Alfa Sut, and now I'm going to butcher the name here. I'm going to say Giardinetta. Giardinetta?
Sure.
Giardinetta?
Giardinetta. Yeah, it's a little garden.
But the picture is amazing, and I want that car.
Yeah, service and assistance car. It is really cute. Yes, I do quite like that.
Yes, that's good. And how about you then? Come on, there's 11, so we can pick one each.
I'm going to go for a classic and very easy one to choose. I'm going to go for the Jaguar XJS Lynx Aventa.
Okay.
Anytime I see one, they just always look great.
I don't...
but there's so many. I could choose 5 or 6.
There's one that I think's a bit ropey, but I think that's more the execution than anything. But I don't think there's a bad one, really.
No. There's lots I would have, maybe not in the colorways that are shown.
There's one that really surprised me that I think works astonishingly well, which I'll tell you after. Not doing it on the recording,
okay.
Then we'll reveal another one.
Dum dum dum. Which brings us, Andrew, to the and finally this week, which seems to be a response to the grumble we were having during New Car News last week.
I think my subconscious was trying to balance things out. And it's from Petrol Blog, and something that Major Gav does is he has a series called Guilty Pleasure. If you've not read it before, we're going to link to the Suzuki X90 and then go into the rest of the site and you'll find others. These do come from the Classic Retro Modern magazine as well. If you haven't bought that before, or if you've forgotten about it, do go to your local newsagent because it is always a wonderful read and look.
Or if you just returned to the UK.
Yes.
And maybe think you should resubscribe. Yeah.
But yeah, so this one talks about, it gives us a bit of history actually behind the X-90. What a wonderful 2-seater SUV with a little wing on the back. And it's just mad. And I don't think we'll ever see cars like this again.
No. Do you know where these have a really, because they did a 2-wheel drive version.
Right.
And you know where these have a big following? hill climbs.
Oh, wow.
You know the old style where lots of people have little low cars and it's just, two-wheel drive cars and all the weight over the back and climbing. X90s, because it's a Vitara underneath, you see. It's really robust. It's really tough. The two-wheel drive version is rear-wheel drive. And they were particularly cheap. But they're fun and silly and completely pointless, and unless you're going hill climbing. And they come from that era of just interesting stuff. I mean, is it good? Probably not. Is it different? Yeah, definitely. And that makes it interesting.
Yeah.
And they even sold. That was the thing.
Yeah.
They did actually sell.
Yeah.
Which we forget about that kind of thing now.
And obviously, it's Gavin Braithwaite-Smith writing, which is always a joy.
Yes. I mean, that's good enough reason to read any article, no matter what it's about, in my book. Is that us for this week, do you think?
It is us for this week.
Okay. So everyone, don't forget, between now and next week, you can give us any feedback, share your thoughts with the show at motoringpodcast.com, on Blue Sky, at Motoring Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and on the contact page of motoringpodcast.com, the hub of all our activities. Remember, you can support us financially via Patreon, and please leave a review and rating on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or however your podcast app lets you do such a thing. Andrew, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Not sure.
If they send a messenger to run to you with a piece of paper, will that work at the moment?
Possibly. I may answer the door. But in the meantime, you can try Blue Sky. If you search for Cracked Windscreen, you'll find my account there. And I'm also on LinkedIn, which when I feel brave enough, I do go on and read the articles without trying to get too cross. But Alan, if people would like to communicate with you personally without using the words Elon or Musk, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way to do that is to use Blue Sky, where I'm at AJP Bradley, and that's Bradley. We will be back very soon, but until then, I've been Alan Bradley.
I've been Andrew Clues.
And safe motoring.